Representative Hess, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, fellow members of the State and Federal Relations and Veterans Affairs Committee. My name for the record is David W. Hess. I represent Merrimack 9, the town of Hooksett, New Hampshire, and I'm appearing on behalf of myself and House Republican leadership in the strongest possible opposition to this item. Let me say that in the 18 years I have had the pleasure of serving in this House, I have never seen a document more vitriolic and more inflammatory in its language. I also have not seen a document that appears to be grounded on fundamental facts, and I would urge this committee, if it is ever going to seriously consider any allegations in an impeachment proceeding or a petition like this, that it not be a statement of allegations and innuendos and opinions, but statements of fact. I have several issues that I would like to raise specifically in the bill, and I don't mean to suggest that I therefore agree with the rest of it. But let me start out by saying at the outset, the war in Iraq, I forget the precise date of D-Day, but the war in Iraq has now been going on for 5 years. 5 years. I think we all agree that our judiciary in the United States is an independent third branch of government, accountable to nobody but the Constitution and laws of the United States. There has been 5 years for lawsuits to be brought and litigation to be commenced on each and every one of these allegations, and judicial determinations to be made on each and one of these allegations. And I would urge you to demand final judicial opinions supporting every one of these allegations before you give serious consideration to this petition, because I don't think you're going to find any, with one possible exception, which I'll get into. I would also like to hark back, Representative Howard, I appreciated your question. You anticipated some things that I was about to say. The detention and incarceration, if you will, of the Japanese American population of the west coast of the United States in 1941 and 42, right after World War II, was an act that was ordered by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, implemented by subsequent Supreme Court Chief Justice Earl Warren enthusiastically. It was ultimately declared unconstitutional, I believe, after the war ended. A similar situation occurred in our internecine war, the Civil War. When the Civil War broke out, Maryland was a renowned hotbed and bastion of secessionist sentiment. The Maryland legislature was overwhelmingly Southern-oriented and had been called into session by their leadership to vote to secede. Abraham Lincoln, on his own, in the position of that threat, ordered the entire Maryland legislature arrested and imprisoned, and they stayed arrested and imprisoned, I think, until the end of the war, or until Grant and Sherman had gotten so far along that they were no longer a threat. Suspension of the writ of habeas corpus. That was subsequently ruled unconstitutional as well. But the point I'm trying to say is those kinds of behaviors against American citizens and American legislators exclusively did not result in the kind of proceeding that you were being asked to commence here. If there is a repeated and intentional violation of the Constitution, where is the Supreme Court decision to that effect? Where is the Court of Appeals decision to that effect? That lapsed because the Supreme Court refused to take jurisdiction. Ask for it. I don't think you're going to find it. Where is anything evidence? I'm not talking about a sheet that anybody can write in Vermont or, out in San Francisco making allegations unsubstantiated by facts. Where is the evidence that President Bush and Vice President Cheney ordered indefinite detention of citizens without access to legal counsel? Plural, citizens. I do remember, and let me just say in passing, I pay close attention to this stuff. I read 3 newspapers a day, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the local newspaper, and I occasionally read others. I have remembered one incident where one U.S. citizen, who I think was arrested in Afghanistan on the war field, was brought back and was held at Guantanamo. He was subsequently released after judicial proceedings were commenced in the United States. I don't think that had resulted in a final decision by the Supreme Court, but I could stand corrected on that. That is the only American citizen that I can recall in the last 5 years that has been involved in this detention process. I do not recall anybody alleging that President Bush and Vice President Cheney ordered and authorized the Attorney General to override judicial orders and violate the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services and Naturalization Service. First of all, the President and the Vice President can't authorize the Attorney General to break the law. The Attorney General has an oath to uphold the constitutional laws of the United States, just like every other federal and state employee, representative, elected executive official. Again, the next paragraph, alleging that the President and Vice President have designated certain United States citizens as enemy combatants. I know of one. Again, an American citizen that was arrested on the field of battle in Afghanistan. I will defy anybody to suggest that that was not an inappropriate determination based upon the circumstances surrounding the event. I do not recall President Bush or Vice President Cheney ever admitting that they, quote, willfully and repeatedly violated the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. I urge this committee to insist that you have documented, confirmed statements to that effect. It is alleged in the next paragraph that the President and the Vice President violated the United Nations Charter. Well, maybe I was asleep at the wheel, but I don't recall any United Nations resolution that was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly to that effect. If so, I'd be happy to stand corrected. The next paragraph talks about George W. Bush's 20-year war on terror. Duh. He can only serve for 8. He's only served for 7. The war started in his 3rd year, so he's out of office, completely off the planet, if you will, before 6 years are up. There is no 20-year war on terrorism. We're only 5 years after the towers were taken out. There's a reference in here to depleted uranium munitions causing widespread radioactive contamination. I know we have in the past, and maybe we still do, use depleted uranium munitions. I think the allegation about radioactive contamination is hyperbole, but again, I'm not an expert in munitions or in warfare. I've covered every paragraph in here, I think. The last paragraph talks about signing statements on more than 1,200 occasions. I don't know what signing statements are. So apparently that's a new left concept heard before.
What?
And finally, this thing about pattern and practice of threatening litigation about counting votes in secret. That sounds to me like it's a constitutional violation and an impeachable high crime and misdemeanor to authorize or allow voting machines to be used and to have the machines tabulate the vote, and that to be the vote unless somebody asks for a recount and we can count them all by hand. Now, maybe I don't understand that paragraph, but I would ask you in conclusion, on each and every one of these allegations, each and every one of these insinuations, they're not statements of fact, they are all statements of opinion, that this committee insists on absolutely incontrovertible hard proof to back them up. Congress today is controlled by the Democrats. They have been since January 1. We have an impeachment that has already been introduced and is already in the legislative process. That points out that this is strictly and purely a political, partisan document. It will serve no useful purpose because the process is already involved, so we don't have to tell them to start getting involved. We can't speed them up because we don't have the majority. The Democrats have the majority in both the House and the Senate. And it's never going to be done in 10 months or 9 months, particularly in an election year, because Congress goes home June 1st to campaign for the seats the second time around. So, I'm sorry, I think this is a complete waste of your time.
I wanted to ask Representative Hess, what is your understanding of the process of impeachment and what it is designed to be used for, if not to question the actions of the President or Vice President through the legislative body? We're not to suggest that a judicial review is the proper venue in which to determine the truthfulness of the validity of the facts. My understanding, that's what's impeachment for, and evidently you have a different understanding of what is impeachment for in your mind.